Management Office. My brother experienced this story when he was in college. Before the summer vacation of my brother's second year of college, his friend Katori found a great part-time job for him. The job description was to work as a watchman at a tourist spot famous for its beautiful ocean view from the cliff top, where many suicides occur. The job is for 1 month starting in August, with housing and 3 meals, and the number of people can be any number of people for 500,000 yen. However, they were not paid unless they completed the entire work period. Katori and my brother decided to take on the job together, splitting the 250,000 yen each. On the first day, we were taken by the Tourist Association for a detailed explanation of the work. At the top of the cliff was an observation deck and a small plaza, and in the plaza was a 1-story management office. When we entered the management office, there was a flip-up door on the floor, or is it called a flip-up door? When you open the door, there is a staircase, and when you go down the staircase, there is a rest room of about 8 tatami mats. This is where they sleep. It was a tatami room with TV, refrigerator, electric stove, and other necessities, but the only telephone was an extension line that went to the Tourist Association. The telephone in the management office was 0 outgoing and it could be used for outside calls. The room had a door that led to a corridor about 2 tatami mats wide, and when the corridor door was opened, there were stairs and under the stairs was the sea. In other words, the bottom of the cliff is a cave into which sea water flows, and the building is in the form of a cliff hollowed out from the top of the cave. During this time, they are free to sleep or go out, and the rest of the time is their working hours. During the rest of the day, they are free to sleep, go out, etc. During the season, the Tourist Association office is open 24 hours a day. Some guests from inns and hotels smelled the Tourism Association. When there is a call that someone has not returned at night, the management office is notified by extension and they go into a surveillance system, but if not, they can do whatever they want in their rooms. The Tourist Association also brings us beer and seafood, and when we are bored, they set up videos for us and leave new pornographic videos for us to watch when we take turns. Katori and I were celebrating the fact that we had such a great job, except for the great atmosphere. About 3 days passed, I received my first extension call and was told that a woman in her late 20s might be going there. Katori and I looked around and found a woman who looked like her sitting on a bench at the observation deck. We convinced her to take us to the office, called the Tourist Association, and a car picked her up and took her away. Katori and my brother were in the room excited about saving someone's life on their first job when they heard a noise outside the door. The noise continued for a long time, but we did not care, thinking that driftwood or trash had washed ashore and hit the stairs, and we took turns the next day. When I reported the noise, a member of the Tourist Association said to me, "It's another season." Well, another season has come. With that, he took the 2 of us down the stairs. The sound of thumping and thumping echoed down the stairs. It was the sound of something like a black mass being rocked by the waves and hitting the stairs. It was a drowned body. The police soon arrived and pulled up the body, which had been devoured by fish and was almost completely skeletonized, with the skull hitting the stairs and making an eerie sound. In August, the tide changes and dead bodies are said to wash up in the caves. If one jumps in during the season when the tide is changing, the body will be washed into the cave immediately, but if one jumps in out of season, the body will be washed out to sea and will not come back until the tide changes. However, if one jumps in out of season, the body will be washed out to sea and will not come back until the tide changes. In other words, the building was hollowed out of the cliff for this work, and there was a building in the form of a continuation of the cave. It was also a secret workroom and mortuary, since it was also the tourist season and a dead body would have caused quite a commotion if it had been raised. The corpses were raised and laid to rest in a corridor of about 2 tatami mats between the rest room and the stairs, and when the tourists were gone, the corpses would be taken away. The job of monitoring suicidal people was a front. The real job was to watch for dead bodies that had washed ashore. Most of the bodies would arrive in the middle of the night. As soon as they were found, they would immediately contact the tourist association so that the police could come and pull them out in the middle of the night. Although the two men were not involved in the work of pulling up the bodies and carrying them out, if they were found during the hours when tourists were arriving, the bodies would be placed next to where the two men were sleeping. I thought 500,000 in a month was too good to be true. They would not get paid, but they had only been there 3 days, and now they could go home and look for another part-time job in their hometown. They thought so, but the 500,000 was more appealing than the fear, so they decided to stay away from the place in their free time, and spend as much time as possible in the upper management office. It was a mistake to try to get by with that. It was shift time and they did not go to the break room, but stayed in the administrative office, but had to go back every 2 hours to see if there was a drift. 3 days passed peacefully without any dead bodies washing ashore. I didn't go to the common room that night either, but stayed in the management office. Katori said, "Isn't that woman suicidal?" A young woman dressed in a t-shirt and jeans was standing under a light on the observation deck. When I left the office with Katori with a flashlight, I saw the woman leaving with her back to the sea, so I turned back to the management office. When they returned, they suddenly heard a banging sound coming from the flip-up door leading to the break room below. She said she was so startled that she almost fell off her back, but she thought it might have been wind pressure from the open door of the rest room and the wind blowing in. He said he thought Katori had a point and they went there together. I knew Katori was right, the door was open and the wind was blowing in through it. When I looked downstairs through the door to close it, I saw something whitish wash up on the floor. "They're here." I immediately called the police, and within 10 minutes the police came and pulled up the body. She was wearing a t-shirt and jeans. I had a hunch it was the woman I saw earlier, but the length of her hair made me think it was probably her. However, although the length of her hair indicated that she was probably a woman, the contents of her clothes were so bloated that they had not retained their original shape. Katori came back to himself and said, "I'm sure I closed the door. I'm sure I closed the door and put the tin can on the door." The fear did not subside on its own. From the next day on, they would go downstairs as soon as they entered the shift, close the door firmly, hang the kannuri, and return to the management office at once. This became a daily routine. What used to be a booze-fueled night of pornography turned into a time of terror. A thumping sound comes from the flip-up door. The door is open, a dead body has washed up. On days when there is no sound, the door is closed and no bodies wash ashore. On days when there is a thumping sound, it is a female corpse. On days when there is a thump, 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 a male corpse. They lost their appetite, developed insomnia, and spent most of their non-working hours in a park in the city, and after 2 weeks, they reached their limit and finally decided to quit. "I can't go to that administration office anymore." They both cried to the tourist association, and they were persuaded that they could continue to work for $1 million, but at that time, fear won out over $1 million, and they refused the offer as if it were cancer. He was actually not paid, but he was given $100,000 each for transportation and other expenses. When I saw my brother coming home with a pale face, he was so surprised that I asked him what had happened, but he remained silent. Since then, Katori and I have become close friends, and she often comes to our house to visit me. 3 years ago, when Katori came to our house for a potluck party, he told me a story that he and his younger brother had been thinking about. This concludes this story. Thank you for listening to the end.